Welcome to the heretics and blasphemers, to the seekers of the unseen. You who have stepped beyond the borders of the conventional, we welcome you into the shadowed corridors of the occult and the profane. This is Unsanctioned, where the forbidden becomes knowledge and the boundaries are meant to be broken.
I am La Hechicera Len, who stands at the crossroads where spirits dwell and whisper secrets. Here we explore the symbols, spells, and stories that society fears to acknowledge.
And I am Sebastian, the sorcerer of annihilation. I believe in tearing down the false walls of illusion and embracing chaos. Together, we're here to shatter taboos and illuminate what lurks in the dark corners of folklore and magic.
I mean, we can. You want to talk about JJK real quick?
Oh my god. Yes.
Let's talk about JJK real quick.
Maki? Hello? Maki? Mommy?
I know I sent you that TikTok of that one lesbian who was like, oh, I feel lazy today. I don't want to do anything. Then the episode of Maki, and now she's like, I'm going to the gym.
Girl, me too. Because what was that? Oh, it was so good. It was so good. So good. So good. The recent episode also, we got two great things, but I mean, they've all been great, but like, we got to see Maki wipe out the Zenin clan, and then we got to see Megumi and Yuji on a date. Stop.
Literally, oh my god.
Stop. And the introduction of a trans character.
Literally, oh my god. Hakari and Kirara, love them so much. I can't wait to see. She probably won't be present for very long because I've heard that she's just like a very minor character. But I'm going to be absolutely obsessed with her no matter how little screen time she gets. She's amazing. Her design is everything. I love the way she looks.
So cute. Such a great design.
Yeah.
Poor
I
Yuji.
saw that like huh?
I said poor Yuji, can't lie to save his life.
Literally. Oh my god, he's such an idiot. He's so sweet.
Who's Gojo?
You fucking idiot. Everyone knows who he is.
It's like saying, who's Beyonce?
Like, what the fuck? On Beyonce's internet? Hold on. There was another thing about, was it Kirara? Oh yeah, it was about Kirara. I saw online that a lot of people were saying that, they assumed that the colored stripe in her hair was going to be pink, and then they made it green for the show. Love that so much. Yeah, that scene at the end of the most recent episode where it's just Hakari and Yuji, I loved that. It was so well done, and knowing that the director was like, they traced over him like doing that. So good. Anyway.
Honestly, amazing. Like, I honestly felt like it was, like, I wasn't looking at an animation. Like, it felt like a movie. And I was like, whoa, this is, like, crazy because, like, the designer, like, part of me that has experience in animation was like, this is amazing animation. And then the, like, viewer part of me watching it was like, why does this feel so, like I'm watching a movie? Like, this is, like, real life actors, like,
very
this is
cinematic.
live action. I was like, wow, this might be one of the best scenes in anime ever, like
ever.
And people are saying like stupid shit, but I'm like, you guys are missing the point here, is that we felt like it was live action but it was animated, and that's such a big thing. But we'll talk about this more in the post show.
Oh, for sure
because we have lots to talk about.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of spirit negotiations, in JJK, no, can't really make that one a smooth transition. But anyway, welcome to another episode of Unsanctioned. Today, we're going to explore the art of negotiating with spirits, understanding how their ranks come into play when negotiating, and how to work with them effectively in your spiritual practice. We can't fully get into that, but we will be getting into it quite a bit. And the reason I say that is because working with them effectively in your spiritual practice could take an entire separate podcast all on its own. But I digress. So don't forget to leave a like or rating wherever you listen to Unsanctioned. It helps us to reach more people looking to travel down the path less taken.
And don't forget to join us over on Patreon at patreon.com/unsanctioned, where we have 3 tiers for you to embark upon: the heretic, the malefactor, and the blasphemer.
We have an email. Use it. We want to hear from you. Send us your stories, experiences, questions, and more to podcastunsanctioned@gmail.com. I'm Sebastian, the Sorcerer of Annihilation. You can find me on social media at Sebas_the_storm on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok, where I offer services like divination, spellwork, and sorcery for hire. Or check out my tattoo page for occult and witchcraft-oriented tattoos and ritualized tattoos at sebas.tat, T-A-T-T, on Instagram.
And I am La Hechicera Len. You can find me on Instagram and Threads at hechicera_Len. So, Sebastian, let's get into negotiating with spirits.
So, listeners, if you've been listening to us since the beginning, this is going to be a kind of conclusion to a number of episodes that we've done about spirits, because we've kind of talked about, you know, these different kinds of experiences with spirits, making pacts with spirits, all these things. But today we're going to talk about negotiating. But again, like I said earlier, working with spirits could take its own podcast. Like, honestly, it is such an experience. There are multiple books out there. You could write books for years on this subject because the subject matter is simply endless. And I'm just going to let y'all know, as listeners, the best way for you to learn these concepts and learn more about these kinds of experiences is to have experiences. So fuck around and find out is going to be the best way for y'all to learn. And yeah, so kind of, why are we negotiating with spirits? I think this is something that we need to address in the first place. I think this is something that a lot of people look over. And I think it's because of this Western idea or something that comes from Abrahamic faiths of like, I automatically have dominion, so I should command instead of negotiate, right? Like, I am telling you what to do. We're not working together. You work for me. Instead of being like, hey, let's work on this together, is a really common thing, especially stateside. We see that quite frequently here in the States. And it really is because of those Abrahamic philosophies that kind of come through, where we see that you are like able to command spirits just because you can, because you as a human are seen as separate, and you are as a human are seen as above nature and above these spirits, which is not true. You are also a spirit. And yes, there are cases in which you do have dominion and command, but there are moments, and a majority so I find, in which negotiating is going to be much more beneficial than just summoning a random spirit and being like, you're my bitch now. And then seeing how that goes. You know, basically this is like the biggest concept that I want to get across is like, we are working with spirits. Sometimes there is moments in which you have to go from negotiating to commanding, but I try to negotiate as much as possible. But let's say I'm short on time and this spirit is being difficult, and I really need this spirit to do something, then we're going to switch to commanding, right? But that's where we'll talk about that later. Like, when is the time to switch? What is the line, and what to do in those situations? But yeah, I think that's something really big to bring to the forefront. What do you think, Len?
I agree. I will say that I won't have much to say on this just because I don't have as much experience doing this. Like I said last time, I'm in the process of doing this, so we are learning as we go.
As we said, fuck around and find out.
Yeah,
Yeah, so this will be
and I've
good
been finding
for
out.
um, maybe we can talk about that later if we're able to, about the finding out, and the experiences, and maybe we can keep it generic for listeners, so that way they can just kind of see, for somebody who is experiencing it as it's happening, what those things are like. versus like somebody who's like done it 1,000 times. Um, so one thing I do want to bring up is like, okay, what are the types of spirits to negotiate with, right? So first and foremost, any type of spirit can be negotiated with, but I won't lie, there are some spirits that just will not negotiate. And that will be dependent on like folklore and your own experience because every spirit is different, just like every person is different. If you've ever met a dumbass who's super stubborn, you really can't negotiate with a dumb bitch. And so that can sometimes be the case as well. Um, and then sometimes some spirits are just going to see themselves as higher than you, and the way of negotiation is going to change. And so those are going to be things to consider later on. But, you know, like, are you negotiating with your ancestors? And what that can look like sometimes is like you're asking them for something, and if they do it, they get a reward. And if they don't, there's a punishment. And there's negotiation on what that can be and what that can look like. Like, are you going to give them water every day for 2 weeks, fresh water? Or are you going to give them water? But if they don't do it, you're going to take away water for a certain amount of time, right? Or take away offering. You can do this with like your spirit court, same kind of concept. With elementals, you can also negotiate. When it comes to like nature and land spirits, though, things can be a little bit different. But we'll get into that later when we're talking about like differences in styles of negotiation. With deities, that can be a little tricky, especially depending on the deity. From like, for example, Santa Muerte, you would not negotiate with her the same way you might, let's say, Hecate, let's say another big name brand. Um, Other types of spirits, you know, demons, angels, let's see, Jinn, Fae, all these things are going to be negotiated with differently and carefully, because different types of spirits can have certain types of rules around negotiating, that needs to be taken into consideration. Disembodied spirits, so the dead, anything like that, because like, for example, the restless dead, or dead that are angry or irate in any way, um, may be more difficult to work with than other types of dead spirits. Or the other thing too is like, if you're negotiating with this spirit that's a dead person, do they know that they're dead? And newsflash, you can't just tell a dead spirit who doesn't know that they're dead, like, hey, you're dead. That can be quite traumatic to a spirit. So I wouldn't just do that personally. But yeah,
Is that something that you've seen happen?
multiple times. Yeah. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, I have seen in cases where a spirit will not realize that it's died, and thinks that it's still going about its life and is getting confused as to like certain types of experiences that it's having, why things are different. Spirits can get upset. So this happens quite frequently when somebody, like, let's say, dies in their sleep, or dies so quickly that like you can't even process that you died. um,
It's kind of sad.
it is, and it can cause a lot of problems. Like, spirits can start to be um, extremely irate, to the point where like we have severe hauntings of various kinds, and that's when they bring me in. Usually, at that point, I have to like go through a whole process, instead of, you know, preventative care. um, um, yeah, and so that's like something to think about as well. You know, and if you're working with the dead in this way, there are certain processes that need to be taken care of, to ensure things move smoothly, just as with any negotiation. And the same thing with, like, we were talking about like nature spirits, you know, like spirits of water are not going to be the same as spirits of land, or spirits of fire, or like the general land spirit that takes care of a certain area. Same thing for like cemeteries, right? Like the cemetery guardian, the one who watches over that entire cemetery. You're not going to negotiate with them the same way you negotiate with like the land spirit, right? These are all going to be kind of different, in various ways. And so that's something to take into consideration. And then the other thing to take into consideration when you're performing these negotiations is hierarchies, right? Multiple grimoires, classical grimoires, and traditions talk about hierarchies of spirits, right? Something is in a specific order. There are certain things, we have, for example, the angels are in a certain rank, right? There's the hierarchies of angels, hierarchies of demons. Go ahead.
So before we get into like the specifics of that, why does the hierarchies matter?
Right. And so, why does it matter is a big kind of thing to talk about when we're negotiating. The hierarchies are important because certain hierarchies will require certain processes to be followed. So, for example, in certain hierarchies, you have to move up up the ranks to get to the spirit that you want, and you're negotiating the entire way. And in other cases, you're going the reverse. You're going to the highest person and then going down. And so it really just depends on which hierarchy you're working with, and that will be dependent to like, okay, well, your negotiating can already fail if you've already gone through the wrong steps of contacting who you need in the hierarchy. And so this is why it's kind of important to know how these things work, why they're important, who's where, because like, let's say, for example, take like, let's say I sent you as a envoy to another country, and instead of bowing, you kind of walked in and just started talking and starting your negotiation. But there's a whole process of like, okay, you actually needed to introduce yourself, you needed to bow, you needed to follow these cultural aspects in order to make sure that you would be listened to, that you would gain an audience, that you would do these things. Same thing here when it comes to these hierarchies, and some of these hierarchies are very strict. These ranks are very strict. Some of them are a little looser, and you'll have to kind of gauge by that because, like, not every grimoire is the same. Not every tradition is the same. So these hierarchies can change, and you really have to like. Yes, there might be like a really great breakdown of the ranks in a grimoire, but you still are going to use your um, own discernment when having these conversations of like, okay, um, do you um is the spirit talking to me like the only person that I'm going to need, or do I need to follow the rank and move and continuously move forward? And then the way that you do that too is going to be important, right? Because like, for example, there might be certain taboos with certain spirits and certain ranks. Like, for example, will flattery work, or will be flattery seen as super insulting, right? So these are things to take into consideration when we talk about ranks of spirits and why they're important. Yeah. But different types of ranking, like we've talked about the angels, the demons. Jinn also have their own hierarchies. Jinn are a little different than like excuse me, demons. Like a lot of people associate them with demons, and I do believe that some of our demonic grimoires, or like the Ars Goetia and things like that, actually come from the Jinn. But there is a difference, and it seems like there was a difference in that involvement from Jinn to demon, because what we see with or Jinn, sorry, is there are ranks and there are certain families that are seen as like super significant and they pop up in grimoire. However, there are also so many Jinn that you can't really do it like that. Like, yes, there are Jinn and there are Jinn families with their own like legions or whatever you want to call them. However, Jinn are also so many as there are people and more, and they live and have multiple. They can have whatever religion they want or no religion. Jinn are not bound by the same kind of concept. So like in Arabic folklore and in Jinn folklore, we do see that concept that there are Jinn who don't follow the Abrahamic faith. There are Jinn who might worship Hecate. There are Jinn who might worship Anubis. There are Jinn who might be atheist. And so it's a really
Good for
cool
them.
concept.
Get out of the Abrahamic
As they
faith.
should. As they should. Um, Yeah, but then you do have some, like the other day we talked about a grimoire, and it talking about a jinn by the name of Safa, who is the daughter of Iblis, and then you go through like a whole process with that. There are other ones where you have to call upon like specific jinn kings. There are like four main jinn kings, one for each direction, and then all of that as well. And the process of that is a whole thing in and of itself. There are certain grimoires where, in order for you to contact one of the demons, you actually you're summoning a lesser demon and then moving your way through the ranks. You're like, okay, I've summoned you. I need to speak with your manager. Okay, cool. Now that I have your manager, I need to speak with your manager, and so forth and so forth. Um,
Like in The Magicians, when Julia and Katie are going around trying to find the goddess, they're like going messing with these monsters, trying to find someone else that's above them. Yeah.
Exactly. Perfect example, actually. And then a lot of times too, you get the same kind of thing where like some of these spirits are like, "Oh, who are you talking about? I am the highest person. There is no one above me. Who is Our Lady Underground? I don't know what you're talking about. Who's Gojo?" Um, and then and then you're like, okay, let's not play this game. And then you have to get more serious and kind of pull out the big guns. Um, and then you do have the reverse, where sometimes you have to, like, for example, we see this a lot with like gaining certain familiars in certain grimoires. Is that, like, let's say you're summoning Lucifer. You'll summon Lucifer or conjure him, perform the whole work, and then be like, okay, I need to speak to someone under you, or like I'm looking to be granted a familiar, right? And the whole process can vary, but like basically it might be like, okay, well, then you're going to speak to my commander or like the person under me, and then you're going to speak to the person under them, and then they might be able to tell you who to go to talk to about getting a familiar, and then you'll do this, and then you'll have your familiar. Or you get lucky and they'll just pull someone from their ranks and be like, here's the familiar, there you go. Um, it really depends. Like, it's never going to be the same every two times. Everyone's process might be a little bit different. And again, every spirit is going to be different. So that process might change as you're going through, right? Like the way that I'm going to ask for a familiar from Lucifer through grimoire text versus asking Hecate for a familiar will be different. And, again, depending on the epithet of Hecate, it's going to be different when I'm asking, one version versus the other. If I'm asking La Blanca versus La Roja, like for Santa Muerte, like it's going to be a little bit different, right? Like my phrasing is going to change. The types of spirits that I might get might change, right? Whereas La Blanca might get me more what we call quote unquote celestial spirit style of spirits, or categories of spirits, or things that are more what call, like, when I say celestial, I just mean above ground. Like things that exist within that sphere. And then if I ask La Roja, it might be more terrestrial spirits. And then if I ask La Negra, it's going to be more chthonic spirits, more likely. Or like, maybe more baneful from La Roja and La Blanca, or La Roja and La Negra. But I might get more protective spirits from La Blanca. Or, you can get all of those from all three. At the end of the day, it's Santa Muerte. But, for example, when I did work with Hecate years ago, and getting a familiar from her, that process definitely looked different than like other types of like grimoire text, right? So that was something that definitely was different. And I'll share more of that in the post show listener, so make sure to join us on Patreon. But again, and then talking from ranks, and if we are talking with the dead, this doesn't always happen, but I've had experiences with it. Let's say we're going into a haunted place and we really need to get one spirit out, or we're doing certain types of work in with these spirits that are trapped in a space. I might find who is the dead who's become the leader of this space, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean in a dictatorship kind of way, but it's like the one spirit that kind of has either been there the longest or is like, well, everybody kind of put me in leadership basically, so here I am. And then I have to talk to them in order to make sure that, all the spirits are gathered, everything's all lined up, everything's good to go, so I can perform certain kinds of work. Like negotiating isn't just for pacting and contracts. I think I need to ensure that that is shared multiple times. There's more to it than that. And so, are you negotiating for spell work? Are you negotiating? We have to remember what is the goal of negotiating? The goal of negotiating is to get to an end result, an end goal, an end process, an ending of some kind that benefits a party. And sometimes, if you negotiate correctly, it's not necessarily benefiting both parties, but it does take both parties into account. And that's when you get into like tricking spirits and stuff like that. But yeah, so those are things to take into account. Like what the way you negotiate and the way you approach spirits will change depending on their rank, essentially. And this is something to take into account. This is one of your circumstances and conditions when we're casting, when we're conjuring, when we're summoning spirits. So this is something to take into account.
But then how does that work for spirits that don't have like designated, because in the grimoires there are designated hierarchies, but outside of that, if you're engaging with the spirit of the land, what would that look like? Because there aren't, like, yes, there are books about it, but there aren't grimoires about it.
Correct. Yeah, so that's where we kind of come into that discernment. Definitely, you need to make sure your mediumship abilities and your scrying abilities are up to par when doing this type of work. So when we're doing with the land spirits, for example, right? This isn't limited to the land spirits. We're just going to use this as an example, listeners. You do have to communicate with them, for example, this is where, having a negotiating spirit in your team comes into play as well. Through all of this, they make it so much easier, but we'll talk about that more in a second. But for example, right, I conjure a land spirit, and then I'm talking to it, and it's like, yeah, I could do this, but there's someone above me who's better equipped, right? That is how I would find out what the ranking is, what that hierarchy is. And they might not even call it a hierarchy or a ranking. They might still see everybody as equal. It's just like, okay, I handle this department, they handle that department. That's all it is. Let me transfer you to the correct department, essentially is what's happening. You're being put on hold and being transferred. And so that can happen. And the way, super crazy concept here, listeners, critical thinking, the way you find out is you ask. Closed mouths don't get fed. So if you are out here just being like, okay, cool, I summon the land spirit, I need this, and I need you to do this for me. And the land spirit's like, oh, okay, I guess. Didn't know that's what we were doing. Versus you being like, hi, like, I need these things. Are you able to do those things for me? Or do I need to talk to another land spirit? Is there somebody above you? Or do you know another land spirit that I can communicate with? And how can I get in contact with them? Is going to be a better way to get those that information across the board in order to really see some changes. And figure out, if there isn't a hierarchy, right? So like in my home city, there definitely was an hierarchy, right? Two types. Okay, the dead were very prominent. There was a lot of dead, and very not happy dead. There was a lot of angry, restless dead in that city. And death, you could just feel it everywhere. And so there was that side. And then when it came to the land spirits, there was somebody who was the highest seat. And this was the spirit of the river that ran through the city, and specifically the spirit of the river who resided at the start of it, which was called the Blue Hole, which is where the start of that river began in the city. And so this sat in a really like holy area that was sacred to both the indigenous peoples and the peoples who live there now. And it was cool because indigenous people would still go perform rituals at this spot for various things. And for me, as a practitioner in my tradition, there was a tie to both the Blue Hole and the spirit being the highest rank and being the highest rank for the dead as well. Because for me, in my tradition, water, specifically caves and the Blue Hole, and rivers and lakes and stuff are access to the underworld. So it was like simultaneously both like guarding an entrance to the underworld, but also being the leader of the land spirits of that city. So it kind of held multiple roles. And I found that out through communicating with various land spirits, like, oh, like, I need this done. Who should I talk to? And then like finding out multiple spirits would say the same person or the same spirit, and being like, okay, cool. I'm now realizing this is like head honcho, el jefe of the city. And I need to go talk to them. And there might not be in certain cities just one. And you may have to like hunt around for them, kind of like in the magicians. Like it's not going to be like, oh, I conjured the main land spirit on my first try. Like, no, you may have to go through various steps to communicate with various spirits, and then they might send you on a journey to find this other land spirit that might be the head honcho, right? And then even that head honcho may have somebody that they refer to, right? Like maybe the land of the state or the land of, like, for example, the mountains, or like such and such categories. So yes, not everything will have like a really great structured, already figured out ranking system. And sometimes you may have to figure it out. But that's half the fun. And so those are like some things to take into account, right? So we do have to make sure that we can communicate with these spirits in order to receive this type of information. And when it comes to land spirits, you do have to like take certain things into account, like, okay, well, am I talking to the head land spirit of the entire land? Or am I talking, for example, with the river, is it just, do they only rule over the river spirits, right? And what does that entail? And then does that mean that there is somebody who rules over the river spirits and somebody who rules over the land separately? And what does that relationship look like? That's another thing to take into account. What do those relationships look like between spirits? Are they feuding? Are they allies? Are they related in some way? Are they do they even know each other? These are things to take into account, especially if you're going to start doing certain type of work within the city, in which you may have to, like I said in earlier episodes, when you become certain types of practitioners, take certain titles, there are certain responsibilities. One of mine was to ensure that all the land spirits and certain types of spirits were keeping peace, essentially, and when to manage all of that. And so, for example, certain types of storms, I could tell were different types of spirits fighting and having to calm them down and be like, y'all quit fighting. Why are we doing this? And then, same thing with like other types of spirits. And maybe it's because it's not even between the spirits. Maybe humans started building in a place without giving offering. Maybe humans started littering or caused some kind of disruption in the space, and the spirits were not taken into account, and now they're upset. So that's something to take into account as well. I hope that answered the question.
It did. That also reminds me of how, like, in Mexico City, when they were making bridges, they were not doing well. Like, the bridges, like, their equipment would get broken. It wasn't functioning well. And they had I think, don't quote me on this because I might be wrong. But I think they had like a Mayan priest go out there and dedicated like a place for the Aluche spirits. And from there, Once they had their dedicated space, their little house, they were able to complete construction with no other problems.
And that's so funny because I was reading my friend Albert Bjorn's book, Icelandic Folk Magic. A lot of similarities between Mexican folk magic, but I mean, folk magic has a lot of similarities across the board. But they have a similar concept that was happening with, I believe, I don't know if it was trolls or some other kind of spirit of the land that was doing the same thing. The bridges would not finish; they would be disrupted. The machinery would be disrupted. All these things until somebody went out there, performed certain kinds of rituals and tradition of their tradition, and then everything was fine. um, so that's definitely something to take into account as well. And these spirits can also help with different things, right? Like, so for example, if um, you know you might go to, like I said before, you might go to the land spirit and be like, hey, I need this. But then it's like, not me. Actually, not even one of us of the land spirits. You're going to go to this cemetery and you're going to talk to this like person in this grave. Or they might be like, yes, but it's not going to be us. It's going to be the land spirit that resides over the courthouse, or something like that. These are all things to take into account. Again, at the end of the day, active listening. I was just talking to my students about this. There's a difference between hearing and listening, right? And a lot of the time practitioners are hearing, but they're not listening. And so this is something to really take into account, listeners, and really just ensure that we are knowing the difference. And this is where we have to fuck around and find out, because there is a difference between hearing and then listening, which is taking that information, processing it, and giving feedback based off of that process. Whereas hearing is just taking it and being like, okay, cool. Anyway, I need this still. And they're like, you're not listening to me. And you're just like in such a headspace where you're kind of just very pinpoint focus, which can be not good in this sense, because you do need to be mindful of multiple things happening all at once when you're communicating with the spirit, because they might be communicating with you through ideas, and then suddenly it's through something else, but you're so like narrow, like minded, and so focused on one kind of communication style that you're going to miss everything else because you're hearing and not listening. Um, and so those are things to take into consideration as well when we're talking to these spirits, right? And then we have to figure out, okay, are we going to negotiate with the spirit? Or are we going to command the spirit? Two different approaches, right? So like figuring out, is this spirit suitable for negotiation? Meaning, is it open to communication? Is it cooperating? Is this a two-way communication? Are we receiving information as much as we are giving? Are we having an open dialogue, right? So like, is this more so a way for us to build respect and build a relationship, because that's really important for negotiating and working with spirits in general, is that you need to build these relationships. Yes, in some cases you will command, but in some ways as well, when you're commanding spirits, that is building a relationship, depending on the spirit. But building that rapport with spirits is really important, because that's the other thing. The more you start to negotiate with spirits, these spirits are all talking to each other. So if you are really good at negotiating and keeping your side of the negotiation, more spirits will be open to you doing it and being open to negotiating with you, because it's already gotten around in the community that you can be trusted. Versus if it is figured out that you don't uphold your end, you trick a lot of spirits, or you're really bad at listening, or all these things, right? That will also go around to these different spirits, right? For example, the spirits in my home town, they all knew me, even if I had conjured them or not. That after practicing for a certain amount of years, spirits knew me. So I would go into a place where I would be called and they'd be like, oh, you're so and so. And they would say a certain, basically a title epithet of me. And I was like, yep, that's me. So are we going to do this the easy way or the hard way? And so then you start your negotiating that way. So it kind of helps to have a reputation as well. But, you need to take that into consideration. And then deciding when to switch to commanding, or if you need to hit commanding right off the bat, is something that you have to really trust your intuition on, right? And your discernment. Because if like a spirit is already hostile, commanding. I'm pulling out the talismans, I'm pulling out everything, I'm commanding. You're listening to me. Sometimes though, even if I'm commanding, there's a gentle approach to it. Because for example, like we said, some spirits may not know what's going on. And maybe like a trapped animal, and like really scared. Like if I cornered you, if I suddenly started running at you, and from like you just saw me on the street and I just started running at you, and yelling at you and swinging something around like a bat, you're going to probably think you're in danger. Okay. I know I would. But you have to be prepared that sometimes these spirits have had really bad experiences in the past with humans, or practitioners, or just in other spirits. So sometimes you may have to take a gentler approach, even if you are commanding. And sometimes you may just have to negotiate, and be like, hey, I'm not here to harm you. I'm just here to talk. And then let's start a conversation. And then you can move into what you need. I wouldn't open up immediately with, I need this. Um, Imagine walking up to a stranger and being like, I need $50. Give it to me. Probably not going to end well. Hopefully they just walk away and ignore you, which could happen, right? Like a failed conjuring. A spirit's like, okay, I'm not doing this. I'm not feeling this vibe. I'm going to go. Can definitely happen. Or you piss them off, in which case you have to either try to calm the spirit, or now you're in a state of like, okay, we are in conflict and I have to figure out how to end this conflict, whether that's aggressively or calmly, or in a more political manner. It's going to be dependent on the situation. But I will say sometimes it happens quickly, right? We've talked about the fact that spirits can be unpredictable. So sometimes you'll be having a great conversation, a great negotiation, and then suddenly you have accidentally pissed off the spirit, right? Maybe you said something that was greatly insulting, and now the spirit is irate, pissed off with you. And so with that being said, you have to like be able to think on your feet and switch your mindset immediately, because this is urgent. It's not like, oh, I can take my time and switch to commanding. Now you have to like switch immediately with the experience. And you have to be able to think clearly, make sure that you have the authority and confidence to give these commands, right? And you have the right to give these commands is the other thing, right? So this comes into a whole nother like topic of like, okay, what is your rank as a practitioner? What is your process of dictating said rank? Are you saying your commands and showcasing your talisman with confidence, or are you shaking, about to shit and piss yourself? Is like another thing, right? Like if I'm like, oh my God, here is the pentacle of Mars, and they're gonna be like, you is a pussy ass bitch. I'm gonna fuck your shit up. And like you are just not able to keep your cool. Which, this comes into fight, flight, or freeze. This same thing can happen when you're having an irate spirit. People usually go into fight, flight, or freeze. Are you going to suddenly flee the conjuration? Really bad. Like fleeing the circle. Like we all know that's rule number 1. Don't step out of the circle. So making sure that, ensuring that You have the authority, right? So whether you have some kind of pact or follow certain grimoires have like certain processes to ensure and that you have the authority. And we've talked before, like with certain types of spirits, like let's say from Catholicism, they'll only listen if you have certain rites performed, baptism, confirmation, catechism, all those things, uh, holy orders, all those things give you certain ranks, right? And those things can also come into play with this. Performing certain types of works for spirits as part of your pacts and negotiations can also give you certain types of authority. In Taoist practice, there is a symbol that we use to be like, okay, I use it a lot in my talismans as almost like a fingerprint scanner, to be like, does this user have the authority granted by the heavens to exact justice? And so that is something that is utilized quite frequently in a number of ways. And then you also have to like have that confidence and authority to command the spirit. So like, for example, certain spirits might present themselves outside of the circle that you're conjuring them in, and you're like, no, you have to stay in the circle. I command you to stay in the circle. You must stay in the circle throughout our entire conversation, throughout our entire negotiation, throughout this entire conjuration, whatever, right? And there are processes to do that. But sometimes they're testing you. They're trying to trigger that fight or flight, or freeze or fawn or whatever. And again, not always malicious. Sometimes it's like a test to see if you're worthy of even conversating with the spirit. We come back to ranks, and being like, okay, lowly human, are you even worthy of my time? If I project my image outside of the circle, are you going to shit yourself? These are things to take into consideration. If I appear before you as the most horrifying thing you've ever seen, will you be fine? Which is another thing, right? Like when we talk about switching from negotiating and commanding, if you conjure a spirit, and sometimes these spirits can tell what your biggest fear is or what would be like a big trigger to make you feel some kind of experience, some kind of feeling of fight, flight, or freeze. And it starts to show itself in that manner. Can you command it to be like, no, I command you to show yourself in a more appeasing manner? What is a better way that you can appear before me that we can conversate without that form? Because some spirits can change forms. Many spirits can. They're not bound by a physical body like we are most of the time. So there's that to take into consideration, right? That is something that definitely I've had experience with, where I'm like, okay, I'm conjuring the spirit. Why are you in the corner of the room? That's not where my casting circle is. It's over here. Why are you not in that circle? Like, get your ass back over here and get inside. Stay in the box. And so those are things to take into account as well. When we are having these types of situations. And so sometimes commanding is urgent. Sometimes you can switch to it and have a more casual approach, but it's still commanding. So these are all things to take into account when we're performing these types of works, and we all have heard me say before, like sometimes there are moments where I'm like, okay, I'm not asking, I'm telling. You will be doing this. But even then, if I am telling a spirit to do something and I'm forcing it and commanding it to, I am still giving a something from my end. I'm never going to leave that empty-handed. I'm always going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to give you an offering. Or sometimes, because usually if I'm having to command so quickly like that, and I'm like, you will be doing this, depending on the spirit, I might give a really, really heavy offering, right? So I might give blood if it's not taboo to this spirit, because it was like, imagine if I just woke you up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and I was like, I need you to go do this. And, and you were like, okay, fine. What are you doing in my house? And you go do it. And then I'm like, okay, cool, thanks. And I just leave and not pay you or anything would be so fucked. So, I might buy you food, or I might give you like $50, depending on what it is, or like something, right? I'm going to give something in return, right? I am a really big proponent, especially in my traditions, that there has to be an exchange. Of equal value. And what that means isn't what I see as equal value. We communicate and be like, okay, well, would this be of equal value to you? Is this worth your time, energy, and effort to do this? And that is something that I'll do. So even if I'm commanding in the moment, at some point there will be a negotiating factor, unless this is commanding in the sense of banishment, exorcism, clearing, all those kinds of things where it's like, no, you are an evil spirit that needs to be removed forcefully. I am commanding you to be gone. I'm not going to give you an offering. I am telling you to be gone, or I'm going to end you. Is basically where that changes. So this is where things can happen. However, this is where commanding and negotiating is a Venn diagram of sorts, because when I'm exercising or banishing or clearing a space, sometimes I'll just negotiate and that can be enough, versus coming in and immediately being like, I have a warrant, everybody get out, is completely different than coming in and being like, okay, you all can't stay here anymore. And for various reasons, like it's not suitable for you to be here. It's not suitable for the living who are here, or humans who are staying here, or whatever the situation may be. And you need to go. And sometimes I may even be helpful and be like, I actually know somewhere you can go, and help them that way, right? But for example, and this does happen, unfortunately, if I've been called to remove and exorcise a spirit, and this spirit was once human, but unfortunately has been corrupted to a point where it's just really evil, really malicious, and there is no returning it back to a human state, I will have to only command and demand and perform a more aggressive, violent type of exorcism, even though it sucks, because I know that that was once a person, and unfortunately, due to the circumstances, they were no longer human, and that's not a fun process to experience. So I've been told. um, so that like really sucks, but I do have to take into like account that it's best for that spirit, and it's best for the people being affected by the spirit, or the space being affected by the spirit, to do it in that way of a more aggressive, commanding nature. So those are things to take into consideration as well. So I know this is a lot of information, listeners. So please take your time. This isn't something to rush through. This is definitely something to take your time with. And it takes a learning curve. Okay. This isn't something that, well, there might be some of you who are actually just naturally really good at negotiating. But sometimes you will need to practice. Sometimes you will need to talk to your spirits and be like, how can I get better at this? There are books on negotiating. Again, have a negotiating spirit who's really good at negotiating. I've talked about it before, but one of the spirits in my court used to be a lawyer when they were alive, and their specialty was in negotiations. And they were very helpful when they were alive, and they're very helpful when they're dead. So that's something to take into account. Now, how do we go about this process? I've kind of already broken it down multiple times, but depending on your spirit that you're conjuring or summoning or whatever, you need to prepare your space, right? And your mindset. Both go hand in hand. When you're preparing your physical space, you're also preparing your mental space for this to happen, right? So, sometimes if I'm performing a really big, heavy conjuration, summoning, evocation, whatever, I may veil or cover my head for a certain amount of days, follow certain taboos and restrictions. So this might be something that I do for a certain amount of time, and then I will perform the conjuration after such. Maybe you need to cleanse and purify yourself before this conjuration. Maybe you need to perform a number of works before doing this conjuration. So, like again, I've talked about how, like in a lot of Arabic grimoires, it's a very extensive process. Some of them are like, you will isolate yourself for 1,000 days in a cave with no contact from humans, and you will only eat certain things, and you will recite this invocation 1,000 times before the sun rises, and then you will recite this invocation 1,000 times after the sun sets, and then before you sleep you will recite this invocation 10,000 times, and then at the end of those days, then you can perform the conjuration of the spirit. Not saying that's how it is all the time, but I'm saying there are cases in which that is the case. And so this is where you are preparing, right? So making sure you have the right offerings, making sure you have the right mindset, the right space, making sure you have the right knowledge. So making sure you know rankings, what's taboo, what's respectful, what's disrespectful. These are all things to take into consideration when you're getting ready to perform a kind of work to start a negotiation with the spirit or command, depending on your situation. For example, there are certain taboos within certain cultures and traditions of summoning certain types of spirits within the house. You wouldn't do it within the house. And some that you would do only at a crossroads. Some you would only do in places of darkness, in places of filth. Some that you would only do in places of cleanliness and bright light. Some things that are bound by these restrictions or concepts or taboos. So these are things that you need to have prepared. For example, if we're going with more mainstream name brand spirits, do you know the epithets? Do you know the process of calling them forth? Do you know the offerings to give? Do you know what the standard procedures are? And then once you've gone through, are you offering respect and gratitude to the spirit beforehand? Is that something to do, or is it seen as more taboo, right? So for example, some spirits may be like, if you are so ready to be like, oh, hail you, great spirit of blah, blah, blah. And they're like, damn, you're a kiss ass. We just met. Like, why are you talking like that? Like, they lose respect for you. Whereas some spirits require that in order to gain your respect for you. And that's something to remember too, listeners. Respect is not given. It is earned. And that goes for humans experiencing other humans and humans and spirits. Okay. Respect is not given, it is earned. And so we need to ensure that that is a process that we are taking into consideration. And then when you are finally at a point, depending on what you're doing and who you're communicating with, framing your request and the way that you frame the request is something to take into consideration. It may be needing to be framed as a question. It may need to be framed as a command. It may need to be framed very subtly, in a way that's very around the bush, and kind of, like we said, like some spirits, you can't say something very straightforward. You can't make it so like, I need this. You might be like, oh, well, I think it would be in your favor to do blah, 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 right? One example of this, kind of a roundabout way of doing things, is like, let's say you summoned a spirit who's very prideful, very about justice, very whatever, and you're like, oh, like once you've communicated and established your respect and relationship, you could be like, oh, by the way, this person who is your enemy, listener, has greatly disrespected you and your name, and has brought great shame upon you, has used your name in great injustice. And now the spirit is going to be like, how dare they, go fuck them up, is something that can be done. And now you've kind of gotten your goal of like destroying your enemy and a new ally. And the way that you word it would have to be, and phrase it would be the way that you would basically essentially trick the spirit, because the best way to do that in my own experience is to put a little bit of the truth in there. So like find out something that your enemy has done, and if they've disrespected you, you can just like be like, well, I mean, they've disrespected me and we're communicating, so therefore they disrespected you in some way, shape, or form. And like, you'd be surprised how many times something like that can really work. But you really have to be careful about your wording. As we've said before, spirits don't communicate the same way we do, and we don't communicate the same way spirits do. So having to figure out a way to get around that roadblock is something to take into consideration when you're doing this. And while this is all happening, you're listening, not hearing, listening, and you're listening, looking for signs, listening to the messages. There might be omens happening while this is happening. Take all that into consideration. And then again, throughout this entire process, if you have a negotiating spirit, ensuring that you're listening to them, because instead of it being one-on-one to the spirit you're talking to, you're going through another party, a third party. So you are having to ensure that process is good, clear, that everyone's on the same page, to ensure that this spirit is negotiating for you properly. Again, don't just get a random spirit to negotiate for you. Not everyone's good at negotiating, and if you are like random spirit in my court, who's really good at healing people but not really good at negotiating, I need you to be my negotiator. They're gonna be like, I mean, I'll do my best, but I don't know how this is gonna go. And they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Could definitely be something that's happening. Again, though, when things switch over to commanding, making sure your language changes. It's no longer questions, it's orders. Making sure that you have that authority, that rank. The use of different symbols or sigils, talismans, pentacles, spoken commands, or oral charms with confidence, and that demeanor of authority is something that's going to be important, right? Like if I were to say, I don't know. St. Michael's prayer is really good at destroying and removing evil spirits, unfortunately. Um, but, if I'm reciting that prayer and I'm like, St. Michael, the archangel, defend me in this night of battle. Bitch, no. St. Michael, the archangel, defend me in this night of battle is going to sound different, right? There's an authority to it. There's a presence to it. And this is where we get into occult linguistics as well. It's like, what words are you emphasizing? And all those little things are going to take into account, what language is this being said in? Does that have an effect on a spirit, right? And this is something to take into consideration when we're commanding as well. And then making sure that your tools are helpful as well. So for example, certain grimoires will tell you certain tools and what needs to be done with these tools to ensure that you can command spirits if it gets to that point. So it's basically like, I came to the negotiation and I put a Glock on the table. Are they going to listen easier? Probably. And that's not going to be the case for all spirits. Like, you're not going to need that, right? Like, one of the common things is a black handled blade that's consecrated in Mars or Saturn attributes. That's used quite frequently in grimoires and traditions. And so, like, do you need that to talk to the land spirit? Probably not. I don't even know, like, if the land spirit would really see that as, like, authoritative or commanding, because like they're not from the grimoire, so they're gonna be like, okay, you're threatening me with a knife, now what?
Yeah, and I feel like with that part, that would be like, if you come from the traditional witchcraft background, a staying would probably be good for that. They would consider that like, oh yeah, I'll listen, like I have to at that point.
Exactly. Yeah, finding those symbols that register as authoritative or commanding for that spirit is going to be important. Again, grimoires make it super easy because they're like, this is the item for all the spirits. You're set. You don't have to worry about anything, or make something.
Yeah. I do have a question for you. Have you ever had to like fist fight a spirit as part of negotiation?
Yes. Um, okay, so background. um, Martial artist. And so yes, weapons are frequently utilized in my practice in a number of ways. And yes, before you all say some crazy ass shit like I'm psychotic, I am insane. Let's get that straight. One thing straight, two things gay. I'm insane. I will fist fight a spirit. No, within certain traditions, you are able to actually physically come into contact with spirits. And so sometimes certain spirits, especially ones that relate to martial qualities, may require a show of strength. And it may be like, if you can subdue me in a fight, then I will work for you and we can negotiate, which is a little gay. But listen, I'm never going to say no to a fight. Maybe, allegedly. And so there have definitely been cases, both with me and other practitioners, in which case part of this negotiation is through the language of martial arts, whether that is through the use of weaponry or hand-to-hand combat or other kinds of things, can be definitely a use. Also, I've also had to dance for spirits. And that has been something that has happened as well. Performing music is another thing as well. So these things aren't limited to just like physical, like vocal language. It can be active or as well, like an action that can happen across the board as well. Like, I will perform this dance for you if you do this. Which usually it's my ancestry spirits that are like more for dancing, and then more the martial wrathful spirits that are like, let's fuck shit up, kind of thing.
I don't know if we brought it up for the episode with initiations and pacting, though we probably should have, because there are stories in Mexico of people having to wrestle with the devil to become witches.
Yeah, we should have brought that up.
I don't even think we did. Oh crap. But like,
'Cause-
we're bringing it up now, so it's good.
right. Hopefully you haven't done anything until you've reached this point. Or you fuck around and find out.
Or fuck around and find out, yeah. Because I remember around the time that I had dedicated myself to Santa Muerte, I'm pretty sure that a spirit was sent to me as a test. Because I remember in my dream, because it came up when you started saying the St. Michael prayer, because I remember like having to say that in a dream once, because there was a spirit in what was like my house, the place that I was living in at the time, that they were like throwing things around. They were causing a mess. They were throwing shit around, breaking things. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Get out of my house. What are you doing in my house? And I was freaking out at the time, so I'm like, oh my god, St. Michael. But then I'm like, that didn't do anything. So which meant that there was a little bit implying that he gave approval of it, or he was like, anyway, whatever. That's something else.
Quick note on that. Two things. One, happens frequently with us with Santa Muerte. We get a test. She's like, what are you going to do? Because I had something similar. And I was like, this thing is scary. Why do I have to do this? What's happening? Also had to basically fight a spirit. Second thing, if you use St. Michael's prayer and the spirit did not respond to it, the spirit may not be from Catholic traditions. So what that means is, let's say you have a hungry ghost from Asian traditions, folklore, and you come in and you recite St. Michael's prayer. You're gonna be like, who the fuck is St. Michael?
Right.
Yeah,
who's that?
Sense. God, which one?
Which one? See,
um,
I didn't think to consider that actually, because I assumed, because at the time I was only involved in Catholicism. Like it was Santa Muerte was my first branch outside of traditional Catholicism. And yeah, I did have to not like fist fight, but I did wrestle with that spirit physically in that space. Um and I mean, I'm still here, so I think that I won.
yeah. And then like for that hungry ghost, right? Like let's say the spirit, like versus if you had recited the Heart Sutra, right? That
Mhm.
might have been a beneficial thing that would have seen result. But I digress. In that regard too, I have had a spirit who tried to kill me once in my sleep, and I had to fight it. Um, yeah, pretty sure I had a stroke.
Oh my god.
As a result, minor, obviously. I'm still here,
Mm.
but sometimes I'm like, that was not great. I think I almost died. um, which was number like I don't know 156 of way times I've almost died.
It happens.
It happens. As a Santa Muerte practitioner, I'm
Mhm.
always almost dying. Um, it's always the almost though, never quite all the way. And I'm like,
Yeah.
don't tease me. Um,
Oh my
don't
god.
edge me.
My fucking
um, it's the book. It's the Sex Wizards book. I'm blaming it on that. Moving
You know
on.
what? I haven't even read that much past the last time we talked. I've been reading JJK, okay? I've been reading
As you
JJK.
should. As you should. I've been bouncing between. Oh, I digress. But basically, I've been bouncing between Sex Wizards and all the Mashika books that you've given me
Oh yeah,
back and forth. Um, moving on. So, speaking of what we kind of just addressed on, like having a spirit and like having to fist fight it, um, knowing how to protect yourself is important. Funny thing, actually, speaking of fist fighting a spirit, in our recent conversation off podcast about weaponry, um, one of my friends, I got them brass knuckles that were inscribed with Saint Benedict's
of course.
cross and coin, like the whole thing, amulet with the prayer of exorcism on the brass knuckles.
Hot. That's amazing.
So
Oh my god.
speaking
I
of
love
fist
that.
fighting a spirit, they will. um, versus mine are the things that I've used have been primarily blades, um, or things that relate to that in some way. I've seen various accounts of other types of weaponry, but knowing how to protect yourself, so knowing how to set up different types of barriers, shields, banishings, whether that's through grimoire following of like the grimoire and what it says to do, or your own practice. This is where you do have to fuck around and find out a bit, and see what works and what doesn't. Knowing your limits, super important. Know your limits, which again you will find out through fucking around and finding out. And try to avoid reckless, disrespectful negotiations, like just going in and being a complete asshole right off the start. Probably not going to end well for you. And making sure that you have a process after your negotiation, because negotiations aren't easy. These can be quite exhausting. So making sure that you have a process of basically self-care after for both you and possibly the spirit, depending on like, is the spirit now part of your court? You know, like, is this something that is happening there? How long did the negotiation take? Are you physically exhausted, mentally, energetically? All these things can happen. Do you now have to go cleanse yourself, right? Like, for example, if you're not used to working with the dead or spirits related to filth and stuff like that, you may not feel well after this interaction, right? Um, I have seen a lot of practitioners who aren't really meant to be dabbling with death feel really bad and get really sick after dealing with spirits of the dead or other types of death spirits, because they're not used to that type of energy and their body just can't sustain it. Newsflash, not everyone can do everything, listeners. This isn't gatekeeping. This is just how shit works, okay? And so if you're not used to that type of energy or that type of interaction, you may have to do something to balance things out, right? You might have to take a baño, a cleanse after. You may have to perform certain types of rites and rituals and offerings. So for example, there was a moment in which I had a public altar for Dia de los Muertos, for people to come and give offerings to the dead. And once that was done, I had to take all the offerings, and I had to go to a certain area and place those offerings and give them to the land to deliver them to the dead. And that was like a process that had to be done, because if I held on to these offerings for too long, it was going to start to feel like it wasn't going to start to feel well physically for me. I have a lot of physical interactions with spirits. Like, for example, when I'm channeling a dead person and performing this type of mediumship for people, the more like mainstream idea of mediumship, when I'm feeling, or like when I'm talking to a dead person, I can feel how they died physically. Not a great experience, but that's part of my PAX. So that's something to take into account if you are finished with your experience. And then another thing, unless the spirit tells you it's a taboo and you can't, keep a journal of your interactions and write everything down. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Write everything down. Write everything down and label it. What time? What was the planetary hour? What was the planetary ruler of the day? What direction were you facing? What was your experience? What were some things that you experienced during that time? Did you notice like time felt faster, time felt slower? Did you feel cold? Did you feel hot? What was the spirit saying? How was it communicating? So this way you can build your own book of spirits, essentially, and be like, okay, well, now I know that this spirit works best this way. And write down your failures too. You can still learn from a failure. It's only a concept in the West, or like a more modern concept, that a failure is what we know it as, with all the negative connotations of failure, whereas it can just simply be a learning experience. Yes, it didn't work, but now I know what not to do the next time. And then I'm going to try again and do things differently and see if that works better. So those are things to take into consideration. And again, like, work with your spiritual senses. This is something that I want to talk about, and I know it sucks that it's at the end, and I should have talked about this earlier, but do not be dead set on having a physical manifestation of the spirit in front of you. I feel like a lot of practitioners are like, no, this doesn't, it's not working unless I physically see the spirit in front of me. Then this is like a waste of time. And like the spirit's standing there the entire time trying to talk to you, and you're like, no, I can't see it. It's not here. And it's like, I'm right here. Why are you not paying attention? Why are you not listening? You're just hearing. And so you might sit there for hours, like performing this evocation or conjuration and like trying to force the spirit to show itself physically. And it's like, I'm here. Can we just move on? And like, you're just spending hours and wasting the spirit's time. Eventually the spirit's gonna be like, I'm leaving, bye. And so an example of this is like, I performed, we've talked about the Black Pullet, one of the conjurations from there, and I couldn't physically see the spirit, but I knew something was happening. And then a few days later, I wanted confirmation. So I was like, hey, can you like give me some kind of like really straightforward, clear sign that you are here and you did answer that conjuration and I'm not just insane? Which we know I am, okay, but I digress. And then suddenly I was at work, and underneath one of my bar booths, not my bar booths, the bar seats, the high tops, literally right in front of where I was working, there was a giant black feather. And there was no way this feather like flew in, like it was nowhere near the doors. It wasn't like smashed or anything, like you could say, oh, it came out on someone's like shoe. And nobody was wearing anything with feathers. Like this was not like a clothing kind of like feather adornment or anything like that. And the spirit that I had conjured from the Black Pullet was known to be a type of large black bird. And so I was like, oh, cool. Thank you. Definitely helped. Thank you. I feel much better now. Cool. Now, can you go get me money? Can you go do your job? Um, was definitely something to have an experience for and to take into consideration when we're talking about the clairs or your spiritual senses and relying on them a little better. Do you have any experiences that you want to share, Len?
I can't think of anything right now. I mean, when it comes to like confirming spirit, like the way that it, I have never been the type to, I don't want to say appreciate, because I appreciate when spirits make themselves known, but I don't appreciate seeing them most of the time. Just respectfully, I don't appreciate it. So most of the time, the way that I know for sure is I'll usually feel like someone else walked into the room with me, like someone stepped into the room, or I feel like I'm being watched from somewhere in the room. And that's how I know that they're there. How I know that, yeah. I don't think was that even, I'm so sorry.
No, that is something that we were addressing and something to kind of bring up. Yeah, okay. Absolutely. I definitely get that feeling too, like, oh yeah, there's someone else here. Like there's someone in the room with me. Even if I can't physically see them. And yeah, I mean, I think, again, listeners, you will have a weird experience that is a given. There will be no like, oh, this is going to be a chill, calm experience. You will have at least one crazy, weird experience at some point. And I do recommend you fuck around and find out. It's the best way to learn sometimes is to experiment and have these experiences. But that will be our episode next week on Unsanctioned. We're going to explore and discuss, as an extension of this episode and the past few episodes, possibly like the last one. I say last, there probably will be more. I mean, like I said, you can talk about spirits nonstop. And as you can see, listeners, if you've listened this far, I can also talk about this nonstop. But we will dive into the art of shadow binding, as we called it, or just binding spirits and locking spirits. And we'll dive into the techniques for trapping spirits or entities of different kinds, why you would need to, what those processes look like, what they have in common, banishings, all those things we'll talk about a bit more on next week's episode. We are also looking forward to a few of the next episodes being things like spiritual senses. We have basically lycanthropy and shape-shifting and Nahualism, I believe we're calling it, correct? Nahualism, which is going to have a special guest. So keep an eye out for that one and the news dropping for that. And don't forget to join us over on Patreon at patreon.com/unsanctioned, capital UNS, where we have 3 tiers for you to embark upon: the Heretic, the Malefactor, and the Blasphemer. The Heretic is $3 a month, the Malefactor is $8 a month, and the Blasphemer is $13 a month. I highly recommend that you go check them out because Len has started a new thing for our Malefactor and higher tiers. So you guys are definitely missing out if you guys don't go check that out. But yeah, that was everything from me. Len?
And at this time, we would like to thank our Patreon supporters at the Blasphemer tier by name. Pablo Rodriguez, thank you for your support and walking with us on the path less traveled. And we want to hear from you. Share your stories, encounters with spirits, or your own forbidden rituals. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Unsanctioned Podcast, or email us directly at podcastunsanctioned@gmail.com.
Remember, what's considered taboo is often where strength and power lies. Stay unbound. Stay unsanctioned.
Until next time, walk boldly into the shadows.
And let the forbidden be your guide.